Welcome back. I hope you had a good break. We just got finished talking about the architecture of the advanced load balancer and kind of how it integrates in with NSX a little bit. And now we're going to talk about things like configuring things in the NSX load balancer, setting up load balancing stuff. And we're going to do all of that through the NSX Advanced Load Balancer UI. We're not going to do that through the NSX UI, right? So how do we get to the Advanced Load Balancer UI? Well, I can log in directly using the IP address of a controller node or the cluster VIP that we saw earlier, or I can cross launch. So if I'm already logged into NSX, up in the upper right corner, I've got this little grid icon. Well, I can click that, and there it is, NSX Advanced Load Balancer. Just jump straight across, and that's going to bring me to the Advanced Load Balancer UI, right? Another web-based UI that we're going to look at, and here we see, the big high-level categories of things that we might do, right? Whether it's going to be applications, which is where we'll spend most of our time, or operations as we're trying to operate different components of the Advanced Load Balancer, maybe do some troubleshooting, templates for frequently used object types or where we're going to configure those templates, infrastructure, right? How I'm going to deal with things like my cloud connector and other automation tooling for the Advanced Load Balancer, and then administration, where we're going to worry about things like user accounts and credentials and things like that, right? All of the system level administration stuff that I might look at for the Advanced Load Balancer. But like I said, we're going to spend most of our time in the Applications tab because these are the things that we want to deal with day by day, or that we will be dealing with day by day. Here I can look at my virtual services or my virtual servers, my VIPs, or other individual components. I can create new virtual services here and bring everything together, right? So we're going to spend most of our time in this Applications tab. Now, before we build an application, we probably want to build many of the constituent components, because a virtual service is a collection of a bunch of different pieces. So here we are looking at the creation of a new virtual IP address. So maybe I'm doing this through the VS VIPs UI instead of the virtual services UI. And what we're doing here is we're defining the virtual IP address, what we're going to listen for, and on which tier 1 gateway the service engine will be connected, because we're going to have a static route. Right? We saw that a little while ago in the previous video. We're going to have a static route pointing the tier 0 gateway to the correct service engine where this virtual IP address will be realized. So we need to know what tier 1 gateway we're going to program this virtual IP on. We can also go in and configure our server pool. The server pool is going to have all kinds of information that goes with it, not just the list of servers, but we'll also have persistence information or health check information or things like that we're going to look at. How are we going to deal with the servers in the server pool? It's way more than just, these 3 servers are my server pool. How am I going to load balance across, between the servers? How am I going to make sure the servers are healthy? And so on. So my load balancing algorithms, we have a number of them to choose from. We can look at our default least connections, which is pretty simple, right? If I've got one server in the server pool that has 3 connections and another that has 4 connections, well, the next request is going to go to the server with only 3 connections, right? Simple least connections. And we could force just a direct round robin, right, where each request goes to a different server, just in a list, basically, and we repeat around the list as necessary. We could look at the fastest response or the fewest servers or the lowest load on the servers. There are all kinds of different profiles that we can use for load balancing. We can also look at health monitoring profiles. And we have a number of these out of the box, whether we're looking at HTTP or HTTPS or UDP or TCP or what have you. I can also create my own health monitors for things that our defaults simply don't cover for you. Persistence, How am I going to persist? How am I going to decide when I load balance to a particular server? How do I know my connections are going to continue to go to that server? Am I tracking that by way of a client IP address, or a cookie, or through TLS SNI, or how do I want or need to do that? So we've got some options here. I can also look at my SSL settings for security, and this is going to help me engage different encryption, engage and manage different encryption settings where I'm maybe enforcing certain ciphers, or choosing whether or not I'm running SSL back to the back end, or just connecting via SSL on the front end. In other words, do I receive an SSL connection and terminate that at the load balancer and do HTTP back to the back end, or do I initiate a new HTTPS connection from the service engine to the server? I control all that through my security settings here. Once I've got my server pools and my virtual IPs created, I can come in here and configure my virtual service. And configuring up the virtual service is simply a matter of putting these building blocks that we just talked about together, right? What's my virtual IP address? What's the server pool that I'm connecting to? And so on. Bringing all of these pieces together so that I can have this virtual application that I'm presenting to the outside world, and have that virtual application behave as I expect it to behave. To validate all of this stuff, I can look at the virtual services UI, and if I drill into a particular virtual service, I can look at all kinds of different things about that. So we've got analytics, we've got logs, we've got events, we've got security services, security views, and these are just all the different analytics that we have for the given virtual service. Now, logs are going to be my access logs. Events are going to be create and modify options or events for my virtual service. Alerts are going to be things that I've defined that I want to be told about. Clients and servers, I can look at the different clients and the different servers and what's going on with those. We may spend a lot of time with analytics, though, because that gives us just a veritable treasure trove of detail about how my virtual services are working. Now, let's go play with all this in the lab. Let's go do this. Let's go build this. This lab's going to take a little while because we are going to deploy an advanced load balancer controller node. Once that's done, we'll go ahead and access. We'll get in, we'll connect, we'll log in, we'll configure up a cloud connector to talk to NSX. We'll go ahead and then start setting up our virtual services and make sure that load balancing actually works. There's a lot of stuff going on in this lab. Take your time, and we'll come back in just a little bit and wrap this lesson up. Welcome back. That's one of my favorite labs. I love seeing the load balancing. I think that's a really neat thing to be able to visualize. After you spend all that time building it, you get to see the service bouncing back and forth between multiple back-end servers. So in this series of videos, this last couple of videos, we've talked about the advanced load balancer controller architecture, right? The controller cluster and the service engines and the virtual services that live on the service engines and so on, how they talk ultimately back to NSX Manager for some route propagation and things like that. We've talked about how to actually make it all go. We've seen how to make it all go. We've built our virtual services. We've set everything up. Really, really neat stuff. And this is incredibly valuable because this is where we're going with load balancing in NSX from here on out. So come back. Next video, we're going to start talking about VPNs. We'll see you there.